Okay, to kind of wrap up this unit on the Middle Ages, we're going to talk about two major things: decline of feudalism, but also reform and dissension within the church, because you have the two most powerful organizations, the feudal system and the church, begin to lose their hold on society later in the Middle Ages, and they're replaced by a couple of different systems. Okay, biggest problem is feudalism just gets too complex. Too many people own too much loyalty to too many different people, and oftentimes these guys were at war. The land becomes divided too much. There's not enough money to be made off of the land. It can't support the number of people living off it. The manor system deteriorates, partially because of the rise of the cities, the Black Death, and the fact that serfs and peasants can make more money elsewhere. And then you have this whole breakdown of relationships, and one of the biggest things that's responsible for this is the Crusades. Okay, they take away some of the strength of this system because of it. Okay, loyalty shifts from the local lord to the centralized king. Kings begin to develop standing armies. Knighthood begins to go out of style. Longbows, crossbows, muskets, different weaponry all make these knights in armor ineffective. Gunpowder makes a castle less effective because you can knock down the walls with cannon. The Black Death kills 1/3 of the population, so you have a scarcity of workers. People want more money. So kings gain power. They listen less to the church for guidance, and you begin to have the formation of modern nations. The earliest two are England and France, but it does spread from there, and Spain begins to coalesce, and a lot of the eastern part, the western parts of Europe that we know today, the ones that border the Atlantic, begin to take place in a lot of pretty close to their form of today. Okay, in England, you have a kind of a pushback to this with the Magna Carta. Okay, it's the first successful rebellion against feudalism. Was led by the vassals of King John of England in 1215. At sword point, the vassals forced him to sign a paper called the Magna Carta, or Great Charter. And this one document is actually the basis for our system of government, as well as the British system of government, a lot of others. It guarantees that the rights of the nobles at first, and then the people later, against unjust actions by the king. And for the first time in history, the people demand that they could stop the actions of the king they did not like. And it begins to subject the ruler to the rule of law. It's the first step towards human rights and government by the people that we enjoy in this country. Okay, so I'd like you to write two principles established by the Magna Carta. Just write these down in your notes. We'll check them in class. Okay. Restart the video when you're done. All right, turning to the church. So you have the government's system beginning to break down. At the same time, the Roman Catholic Church begins to lose some of its power and authority. And some of the ways this happens is people learn to read. Okay, previously, during the period from, say, 700 to 1000, as I've said many times, usually the only guy in the village who can read is the priest. People begin to read, and so they can make the judgment for themselves. They don't need the priest as much. They can read their own Bible and make their own decisions. The church loses the Crusades. They're driven out. After initial success, they're driven out of the Holy Land. Well, if the Roman Catholic Church, who's the main supporter of this crusade, are the followers of God, how could they lose? Why is the church so rich when Jesus was poor? Shouldn't Christians live in poverty like Christ? And you have this whole discussion again, which they thought was settled, of whether Jesus was a man, an angel, or a god. So all of these questions begin to get people to question the church, and leads to a string of reformers. And then finally, in the early 15th century or 1500s, the whole thing erupts all across Europe in what becomes known as the Protestant Reformation. Okay. One of the things that leads to this is what's known as the Great Western Schism. The church had already divided between the Eastern Orthodox and the Roman Church, but then in 1378, you have an election of a pope, but he's the second pope. And now you have two people who claim that they are the head of the church. It grows out of a power struggle over who would be pope. The King of France is trying to take control of the church. He elects his own pope and moves the papacy to France, where it remains until 1417. There's a pope in Rome, and there's a pope in Avignon. Okay, you have the beginnings of heresy, which is defiance of church teachings. Okay, the church doesn't like all these questions about its teachings, and people who oppose the church are declared heretics. And an inquisition was created to stamp out these. One of the first of these guys is John Wycliffe. He's an English scholar. He believed that everyone who could read should have access to the Bible, so he translates it into English and probably a little bit into French. He believes the church should be poor. The church brands him as a heretic, and his works were banned. Only Bibles in Latin, the language of the priests, are allowed. Okay, so first example of some heresy. You have another one. This is farther east in the area, what is now modern-day Czechoslovakia, a man named Jan Hus. Okay, he translates the Bible into Czech, and he protests the German domination of the Church of the Holy Roman Empire, that kind of precursor to the German Empire of the later times in modern-day Germany. Okay, it's the remnants of Charlemagne's old empire. He protests the immorality of the church. He's brought before a church council. He's declared guilty, burned at the stakes, and it leads to a brief war in the areas around where he lives. Out of this comes the Inquisition. Church during the Middle Ages invented rules for terrorizing people into accepting its teachings. Church spies informed church leaders who they thought were heretics. These accused heretics are brought before the Inquisition, and they were asked whether or not they had admitted they were heretics. If you say yes, you're in prison for the rest of your life. If you say no, you're burned at the stake. Not really a win-win situation a win situation for the person who is being on trial. Okay, priests are not allowed to shed blood, so they kill these heretics by burning them at the stake. Thousands are killed in France, Spain, and Italy. The strength of the church is restored in these areas, but the Inquisition doesn't work as well in the German states. A lot of the local leaders don't support it, so it plants the seeds for the later Protestant Reformation that sprouts up in the middle of the 14th century, in the 1500s. Okay, so give me 3 reasons for the decline of the power of the church, and that's it for this one.